Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me at this lunchtime webinar on buying a pre-owned electric car. My name is Mal Skoron, and I will be your presenter today. I see some people are trickling in, so before I get started, if folks could just send me a quick note in the Q&A box so you can hear me okay, that would be great. And we'll get started in just a minute, but please do confirm that you can hear me okay in the Q&A. Okay, lovely. It looks like audio is all good. I think it's always worth double checking at these times now that everything's virtual. So thanks for those that sent in a little message. Again, my name is Mal Skoran. I'm a program associate for Green Energy Consumers Alliance, which is a nonprofit organization that is working with National Grid in upstate New York to try and accelerate EV adoption. So the goal of the Drive Green with National Grid program is really to make it easier for folks all across the state to get into an electric car, to realize all the benefits that driving electric offers, which I'll be touching on a little bit today in the webinar, and also to help lower greenhouse gas levels in an effort to mitigate climate change. So before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. So if you have questions, please, I encourage you to send them in. This webinar is scheduled for an hour, but it shouldn't take that long to go through all the slides. So I encourage as many questions as you have, please send those in the chat box or in the Q&A box, and I'll take regular breaks to cover them. Here we have the agenda up on the screen. And this webinar is really all about trying to take advantage of the benefits of specifically pre-owned electric cars. So that's what we'll be going through in the first little section. Then we'll move on to a topic of interest for a lot of people that are just learning about battery technology, which is health, longevity, and degradation, and also warranties. So making sure that if something goes wrong in your car, you'll be covered by the auto manufacturers. So I'll provide some concrete, helpful information about that. Then I'll just be reviewing some popular electric cars to buy pre-owned and some models you might want to consider depending on your budget, your desired range, and some other factors that would help you figure out which car you want to go for. And then finally, you know, buying an electric car really is just like buying any other car, but there are just a few helpful tips that'll help you feel better about your purchase and make you feel like you're making the right decision. So I'll go over those as well. I am speaking from experience with this presentation. That is me in the picture there with my 2017 Chevy Bolt that I bought pre-owned just last November. So I've been driving it about a year. It's been a great car and has served me well. And in the picture there, I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's actually another Chevy Volt right behind me, which belongs to my roommate who test drove the car along with me and ended up loving it and bought one as well. So I'm a true believer in these cars. I have some personal experience, so feel free to ask questions related to my own experience as well, which has been great. And again, just as a reminder, everyone is muted, but you are encouraged to ask questions in the Q&A box, which you should see on your screen there. So one of the first benefits of buying a pre-owned electric car that I want to talk about is the fact that the manufacturing emissions of the vehicle are accounted for. So greenhouse gases when you're driving an electric car are already decreased because of the fact that electricity is a much cleaner energy source than petroleum is. So whenever you're driving an electric car, your per mile emissions is substantially lower, especially in upstate New York, which has one of the cleanest electricity systems in the country. So any electric vehicle will dramatically reduce your carbon footprint. But the thing with electric vehicles, that there's kind of like an asterisk there on those environmental benefits, and it's that battery manufacturing does contribute to some of the emissions that come to add up to the manufacturing emissions. So on top of all of the regular emissions of putting the vehicle together, producing the battery adds some to that. Even so, when you're driving an electric car, you can see about a 50% reduction in lifetime emissions, according to the Union of Concerned Scientists. But with a pre-owned vehicle, those manufacturing emissions don't exist, right? You're driving a vehicle that has already been on the road. You're giving a second life to a vehicle that is already produced. And so when you account for the fact that the orange and blue bars just are not part of your carbon footprint when you drive a pre-owned electric car, then you can see an actually 84% lower lifetime climate warming emissions compared to a new gas-powered car. So if the environment is the reason that you're really interested in going electric, then buying pre-owned is just one way to kind of add to those environmental benefits. But you don't have to be an evangelist for the environment to be interested in a pre-owned electric car. Pre-owned electric cars are some of the best value cars that you can buy. And in general, you can get a great car for a really great price. So here on the screen, I have 3 different vehicles that you might be considering if you're interested in a small sedan type vehicle. So the first is the 2020 Honda Civic, which, gets decent MPG. It's not too expensive to buy new, about just under $20,000. And it actually compares really well to the new 2020 Nissan LEAF, which costs about $22,000 to buy when you count all of the incentives available on the federal level and also the state level in New York. So the prices are pretty comparable. And the real benefit that we see here is the electric vehicles, both the new 2020 LEAF and the used 2017 LEAF, are much cheaper to fuel annually. So you see a lot of savings over the long term. But the savings really stack up if you're interested in buying pre-owned. You can see that the 2017 Nissan LEAF, so a used vehicle that is just 3 years old, you can get a good deal on, buy it for less than $10,000, and you still see those fuel savings. So on top of that, the Nissan LEAF is all electric. So they're, fun to drive, smooth acceleration, they're quiet. They have a lot of benefits over conventional gas-powered cars. And so once you kind of compare apples to apples, you see you can really get a good deal on a pre-owned electric car compared to one that you might be considering of a similar size. So it's worth mentioning that all electric car drivers save money in the long term by switching to an electric car over a gas guzzler. A recent report by Consumer Reports found that when compared to the best-selling, most popular, most efficient, and most highly rated gas-powered cars, electric cars actually win out when you consider lifetime costs. And this graph shows that the savings improve as the vehicle ages, which means that folks that are buying pre-owned vehicles are saving more compared to the comparable vehicles that are gas-powered that they would be buying instead. So you can see that if you're buying a new Chevy Bolt, for example, you can expect to save 5% compared to a comparable gas-powered car. But if you're buying one pre-owned, you would save as much as 17% if you're comparing it to a similarly sized car that's also 7 years old that you would buy pre-owned. So the savings increase as the car ages, and as you are considering, getting an older vehicle, which is really great news for folks that are in the pre-owned market, because although all EV drivers are saving money, pre-owned EV drivers are saving the most, which is great news. In addition to all of those cost-saving benefits and the benefits for the environment, electric cars can be a really great option for lots of different lifestyles and budgets. I'll be talking about this a little bit more later in the presentation, but it's worth noting that, early release electric vehicles have limited ranges because the technology is still developing. And so they are really great for some specific uses. So for example, if you are retired or you mostly do round the town driving, I'm not sure how much driving you're probably doing with stay-at-home orders with the pandemic going on, but electric vehicles are a great option for folks that stay local and don't do a lot of long distance driving. They're also really great for two-car households. So if you have one vehicle that you can rely on for long distance road trips, then that second vehicle can be used for your local driving at very low cost for operation and maintenance. So it's great for those families as well. If you have a teenage driver in the house, an electric vehicle is a great option, and limited range can even be a bonus there as well, because the car can't actually get too far before it runs out of charge. And we'll see a little bit about what kinds of vehicles are available and what you can expect. And then finally, an electric car, especially pre-owned, is great for any driver that's looking to own a car as cheaply as possible. That's a big part of the reason that I decided to go electric, buying my 2017 Chevy Bolt. And it's a major component of a lot of people's decisions, because ultimately, you want to make a decision that makes financial sense, makes economic sense, and a pre-owned electric car is that. And I don't have time to go into all of the other great reasons to go electric, but there are plenty. So electric vehicles, both all battery electric and plug-in hybrids, emit fewer noxious tailpipe emissions. So that is the particulate matter that can flare up asthma. It's the nitrogen oxides and sulfur oxides that are associated with other conditions of the heart and lungs. You get none of that with an electric car, and you get none of that with a pre-owned electric car as well. I talked about this a little earlier, but electric vehicles provide a quiet and smooth ride. So for the money that you're paying for them, you're really getting a great value. Quiet and smooth acceleration is typically something that you would have to pay a premium for in a gas-powered car, but that all comes standard because electric cars run on powertrains that are simple and quiet, and so you get all of those superior driving experiences for free. And then finally, for many drivers, charging is convenient. It's more convenient than having to take detours to the gas station, especially if you can plug in at home or at work. If you're joining me on this webinar, it's very likely that you're a part of National Grid's program to try and install more charging stations at workplaces and large multi-unit dwellings, so apartment buildings and condos. So it's very possible that you have charging in a convenient place near you, and that'll make it all the more convenient. So next up, I'll be talking about maintenance and battery health to dive into the nitty-gritty of what you need to know if you're thinking about considering one of these vehicles. But first, I'll take a quick break for questions. Okay, I see one here that asks, does your cost to fuel estimate include maintenance costs as well? It does not, but I'll be diving into that in this next section. So that's the perfect segue since I don't see any other questions at this time. So one person has just stated, I expected the annual fuel cost savings to be higher. Yeah, so that number comes specifically from the fact that most of the country is experiencing record low gas prices. So if you're, seeing gas prices that are under $2 a gallon, it's really hard to, see those savings because oil prices are on the floor. Once oil prices rebound, likely in a year or so, those cost savings will be a little bit more clear. But one of the things to consider with an electric car is that electricity is a regulated resource, right? So every, I think it's either 3 or 4 months or 6 months, there's a regulatory body that has to approve the price that you pay for electricity, and they make sure that it doesn't get too high. So what that means is you can expect your electricity rates to remain fairly stagnant over the long term, whereas oil is a global commodity. If the demand is high, then prices are going to be high, and we're seeing lower oil prices now than we were 10 years ago, but you can imagine a situation where oil prices go through the roof, and you're not protected from that as a consumer. So electric cars really protect you and keep your fuel costs consistent, and you'll save money even with oil prices being as low as they are. But yeah, thanks for asking that question. That was a good one. And if you are interested in kind of plugging in the math and doing that yourself, at the end of the webinar, I will be providing a resource, which is the Drive Green with National Grid website, where we have that math kind of laid out, and you can plug in your own numbers of, how many miles you drive annually and what the current efficiency of your vehicle is, so that you can see exactly how much you would be saving if you're switching to electricity. So I think one of the most understated benefits of driving an electric car is that an electric car has a really simple powertrain. So in the picture there, you see on the right-hand side, the battery is on the floorboard of the car, and the motor, which is an induction motor, connects directly to the wheels, and however much energy the battery is putting out, that's how quickly the wheels are spinning, and that's how fast you're driving. The overall vehicle is really simple, just has about 20 moving parts, and there's very little that can go wrong. If you compare that with a combustion engine, it's a very complicated system. It has 400 moving parts, fuel lines, oxygen lines, there's a transmission. It's basically controlling a small explosion in your vehicle to propel the vehicle forward. And so when you start comparing the maintenance requirements and the likelihood of something going wrong in the long term, combustion engines are much more complicated, have many more moving parts, and are more likely to need costly repairs than electric vehicles. And you can actually see that in the data. So this is data from the Consumer Reports analysis that I had mentioned before. And it shows that consistently electric vehicles, both battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids, are less expensive to maintain and repair than their gas-powered counterparts. So this data comes from the lived experience of, I think, about 10,000 different drivers. And you can see that, especially for the first 50,000 miles, battery electric vehicles win out big. It's about half as much. But if you're buying pre-owned, what you really want to be looking at is 50,000 miles and above, right? So how likely is it that the vehicle that you're driving is going to have major issues in the future? And when you're looking at a combustion engine vehicle, the cost to maintain and repair increases dramatically, especially after you hit those first 50,000 miles, but especially as the car ages long term. If you compare that with a battery electric vehicle, the costs increase obviously over the long run. Even battery electric vehicles may have an air conditioner to replace or have some sort of other climate control issue or some other repair that could be costly. But you can see it's dramatically lower than the internal combustion engine vehicle. And that's, again, because of that simplicity of the powertrain. There's no transmission, no muffler, no spark plug, none of those things that would cause you trouble in the long run. And you see that those benefits extend even to used plug-in hybrids. So even though a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, which has both a gas engine and an electric engine, needs that regular maintenance, so oil changes and regular inspections, driving part of your mileage or spreading part of your mileage between two engines dramatically decreases the likelihood that something will go wrong and that you'll need to invest in costly repairs in the long run. So if you're thinking about buying pre-owned, you really want to be looking at the cost it takes to repair and maintain in the long run. And electric vehicles clearly win out there. But you have to consider the battery as well. So that is a major concern that I think a lot of people have if they're considering going electric. I think we've all had the experience of working either on a smartphone or a laptop that just can't hold a charge, right? And so we've had those experiences with lithium-ion batteries, and we expect to see the same type of performance in electric vehicles. But the good news is that that's not what we're seeing at all with vehicle batteries. Although some amount of range loss does occur and is a natural part of the aging process, these batteries are advanced enough that it's very unlikely that you'll see a sizable difference, especially if you're buying one of the newer electric vehicles from, say, 2017 on that has a larger battery. So with basically the capacity loss that you might see in an aging battery decreases as the battery size increases. So what that means is that electric vehicles are largely protected from some of the frustrating experiences you might have had with a smartphone or laptop that just can't hold a charge, because that process doesn't occur as quickly when a battery is really big, like it needs to be to power a vehicle. The other good piece of news is that driving more miles doesn't necessarily mean faster capacity loss. So what that means is that you can anticipate to drive your vehicle for thousands and thousands of miles and expect to see consistent performance over the long run. And then finally, if there is some sort of mechanical or electrical issue in the battery, it's rare, but it does happen. Those are usually covered by warranty. And automakers right now are providing extremely generous warranty benefits to electric vehicle drivers because they're that confident in the technology. So while you do have to be thinking about the battery and it may be part of your purchase decision, pre-owned electric vehicles are extremely reliable, and it's unlikely that you'll have any issues as a secondhand buyer. So let's look at some concrete data to back that up. So in a electric vehicle that can travel about 150 miles per charge, like the Nissan LEAF, you can expect to lose about 10% of your range after 5 years. Again, it's not really a function of how many miles you're driving, but how many years the vehicle has been on the road. Really, it's mostly connected to how the vehicle has been charging and what its history has been like, but time is the best proxy for that metric. And so after about 5 years, the vehicle will have lost 17 miles or so. which maybe would be noticeable for a first-hand buyer after 5 years, that as a second-hand buyer, you're getting a really great deal on this vehicle. And so it's something to be aware of because you want to know about how many miles to expect on the vehicle. But again, it's minimal range loss. And it's worth noting that typically there's a very early drop in range, and then the rate of decline slows down in subsequent years. So of this 10% range loss, the first 3 or 4% might have happened in the first year, and then that slows down over time. If you compare that with a vehicle that has a much larger battery, so the 2017 Chevy Bolt, for example, you see a much slower rate of decline. So this is only about 3 years of driving because that's how long these vehicles have been on the road. But we're only seeing about a 4% in range loss, which is much more minimal. And you would barely notice that as a driver. In part because when you're looking at the given range of a vehicle, that number is largely an estimate, and it depends on how fast you drive, what temperature it is, and whether you're driving uphill or downhill. And so with 4% loss in range, with all of those other factors included, that is not something you would notice as a driver. And as a vote of confidence, battery technology is improving really rapidly. And so as these vehicles are increasing in their range, they're also increasing in reliability. And so both General Motors and Tesla have made announcements that they're really close to cracking the code on a 1,000,000-mile battery. So they expect their vehicles to be able to drive as much as 1,000,000 miles before the vehicle loses 20% in its range loss. So that's really substantial. I think it's really great news for folks that have their eyes on electric vehicles, and it's a vote of confidence for the vehicles that are on the road today, because we see them performing well in the long term. But again, there are recalls and accidents all the time, right? So sometimes the way that the battery is manufactured or put together means that it doesn't quite have the performance that is guaranteed. So if that does happen, most, if not all, automakers provide a very long coverage period in which if the battery is not up to snuff, they'll replace it free of charge to you. So for most vehicles, that coverage extends to 8 years or 100,000 miles, and it does extend to the secondhand owner. So you'll have to read the fine print on that, but in general, the battery warranty should automatically transfer to you. And it's worth mentioning that the warranty covers a certain amount of range loss over a certain amount of time. So for example, if you're looking at the BMW i3, if you lose more than 30% of the car's original range, then you are eligible for a battery replacement. There's a really helpful resource here evaluating EV warranties from My EV, which I can see some people are asking if this will be recorded and sent out. Yes, I'll send both the slides and the recording out so that you can go through this at your own pace and use some of the resources that you see here. But the point is, warranties will cover you if the battery does not work out exactly, but that is really rare, really unlikely, and probably something you won't have to worry about as a secondhand EV owner. So I don't see any other questions besides whether this session will be recorded, which it will be. So I'm happy to just move on to the last section, which is popular EVs to buy pre-owned. So this section will just talk about some of the things you might consider as you're looking at specific cars and shopping. The electric vehicle market is still very small. You can see that the number of new electric vehicles being sold in the United States is increasing quite quickly over time, and 2020 is no exception. Even though the car market has slowed down significantly in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, electric cars are doing better than gas-powered cars, so we'll continue to see growth there. But suffice it to say, if you're trying to buy a pre-owned EV, there are not as many options as with a gas-powered car. You can see there are kind of three different sections that I've separated here into this map. In the first section, from about 2011 to 2014, those are where you'll find the most inexpensive electric cars. They had very limited range, usually about 80 miles if they were all electric, and 11 or 15 miles if they were a plug-in hybrid. And so for that reason, you can buy them extremely cheaply, but they are low range. And because so few of them were sold in that time, they can be difficult to find. This next period, 2015 to 2016, that's where you can find cars that are really good value. So their range is a little bit better, but they still have really good prices because of the advancement of technology between 2017 and 2019. So you can get a really good value on those vehicles. And again, although sales had increased in that time period, they can be a little harder to find. The last time period, 2017 to 2019, that's when electric car sales have really kind of boomed. You can find a lot of possible options with high range, high performance, and therefore the best battery health, but they do come at the highest cost. So that is something to consider as well. Specifically, cars that were 2018 or 2019 model years, those are almost like new prices because the vehicles just haven't been on the market for very long, and they do have that advanced battery technology. But the good news is there are a lot of options from especially 2016 and 2017 for lots of different vehicles. And so that is a really great place to start if you're thinking about buying secondhand. So just as an example of what you might want to be considering as you're trying to figure out what electric car is best for you, it's really important to recognize that even the same vehicle can vary dramatically in terms of its specs because of how much battery technology has advanced. So if you're looking at one of the first 2012 Nissan LEAFs that was ever on the road, it was the first mass market electric car available in the world. It originally could only drive about 84 miles on a full charge. So that is not very much at all. Those vehicles have experienced quite a lot of range loss because of that small battery. And you can buy those vehicles for around $6,000 in the New York area. If you start stepping through the different generations, you can see improvements in range that are correlated with increases in price. So the 2016 Nissan LEAF, for example, could get about 107 miles on the charge, and it's a slightly higher price than the 2018 version. It's about double the price, and it can go about 151 miles with some limited range loss. And then finally, if you're looking at a top of the line 2019 Nissan LEAF Plus, it can go over 200 miles on a full charge, but you see really high prices because those vehicles are almost like new. So if you are shopping, it's important to note that you want to not just consider your budget, but also the minimum amount of range that you're considering. So if you really think that a vehicle like the 2016 Nissan LEAF can work for you and your driving needs, especially if you're buying it as a second car, or if you mostly do round the town driving, you can get a really great deal on it. Otherwise, some of those pricier vehicles will be more costly. But you do want to pay attention not just to the vehicle model, but its year as well, because that'll dramatically change the prices that you see and the range that you get. So in addition to the Nissan LEAF, there are quite a few really popular battery electric vehicles that you can get at great prices. The first is the BMW i3, which, you know, if you're buying a pre-owned car, BMW might not come to your mind first, but the i3 is reviewed really well. And an added advantage that it has is that you can buy one with a battery and a small gas tank. So if you're buying like a 2016, 2017 model year i3, you can go most of your miles on all electricity and then have that gas backup for support. Those vehicles obviously are slightly more expensive than the vehicles that only go 80 all electric miles, but it is an option if that appeals to you. Another really popular car is the 2016 and 2017 Volkswagen e-Golf. The 2016 and 2017 models have slightly different ranges, and so if you are interested in having more like 125 all-electric miles, it's better to opt for the 2017 year as opposed to the 2016. And that varies in price as well, depending on the vehicle and where you're buying and, you know, what additional safety packages and whatnot it has. But you can get some good deals on there. And then finally, probably the most or the highest range vehicle that you can buy on this list is the 2017 Chevy Bolt. I happen to know from experience and talking to a lot of EV drivers that they are mostly vehicles that are off lease. So people that were trying an electric car out for the first time decided to buy or lease one in 2017. And then I know lots of people that liked it so much that they traded their old car in and got a new 2020 Bolt. So a lot of these vehicles are gently used. They have great range and low degradation in the battery. And you can get them for pretty decent prices as well. And here's my personal favorite section because I happen to own a pre-owned plug-in hybrid myself and was able to get a great deal on it. The car that I have is a 2017 Chevy Bolt, which you can see in the picture there. It gets about 30 to 50 miles on electricity with a full charge, depending on which model year you get. I think about 50 is what you get for the 2017 models and on, and then around 30 is what you get for the 2011 to 2016 models. But they're great cars, very reliable. Of course, I'm biased because I've had one, but I was able to get a great deal on it and have seen savings from both electricity and using the highly efficient gas. And it's been a great value for me. One other option that is a little bit newer is the 2017 Toyota Prius Prime. So it has a slightly lower range. It only gets about 25 miles on electricity, and then it has the full gas tank. And so if you drive very minimally and can make 25 miles of electric range work for you, it's a great car. But because it is newer and kind of a more recognized vehicle, you see higher prices on that vehicle than you do the Chevy Bolt. It's also worth noting that the Chevy Bolt has been discontinued. General Motors doesn't make them anymore, which I think probably contributes to some of the low purchase prices that you see. But you still get a great deal on it. And I've had to take my vehicle in for a recall related to like a air conditioning hose rubbing up against something else. And I just took it to my local Chevy dealer, and they serviced me without a problem. So you shouldn't see any type of difference in service because of the fact that the Volt is discontinued. But it is why you see the higher prices for the Toyota Prius Prime, is that vehicle is still really popular. People love their Priuses, and so you see a higher price on that. But if you're a Toyota loyalist and you're interested in a Another vehicle that is a good value, there is the 2012 to 2015 Toyota Prius plug-in hybrid vehicles, which get a much lower range per charge. It's only about 11 miles on electricity and then a full gas tank. You can think of it as like a really much more efficient version of the Toyota Prius that you're probably familiar with, and you can plug it in. And so if you are really devout about plugging it in and you don't drive very much, then a lot of your miles can be on electricity. But it's just a good value car, and again, less likely to have those long-term maintenance and repair issues that we discussed earlier. So that, rings true with all of these vehicles and makes them a good value compared to a comparable fully gas-powered car that maybe has a similar purchase price. So I do see one question about what hybrid four-wheel drive SUVs are available. So that is a great question. I will start answering it by saying that four-wheel drive is a big efficiency suck, which is why we haven't seen a lot of four-wheel drive vehicles be released with electric powertrains yet. It just really cuts into the range and makes it not as worth it for a lot of drivers. That is changing. So I believe that a lot of the new plug-in hybrid SUVs that are coming, so like the RAV4 Prime, which is essentially the RAV4 SUV with the same model of the Toyota Prius Prime, so you can plug it in and it has that additional efficiency. I believe there's an all-wheel drive option for that one. And I think Ford is coming out with a plug-in hybrid version of the Escape that has an all-wheel drive option as well. Notably, those vehicles are just coming to market. So if you're in the pre-owned market, then you might not be able to take advantage of that yet. And I imagine people will want to be holding on to those cars for a while. And so I think the earliest you could probably see them on the pre-owned market is in 3 years or so. But, and I'm going to put a big but out here, the price of new electric vehicles is decreasing really rapidly. So some analysts are predicting that as early as 2024, electric cars will achieve cost parity with gas-powered cars. What that means is, as a consumer, you'll be able to look at a gas-powered car and an electric car with similar sizes and features, and they'll be about the same price. And so if you are looking for some of those more specialized options for SUVs or all-wheel drive, then those will become much more affordable in just a couple of years. But as it stands, there are just not very many of them on the pre-owned market right now. Yes, and someone has confirmed that they recently bought a RAV4 Prime that's all-wheel drive. So they are out there, and it's worth kind of keeping your eye on it if you are interested. I've heard great things about those vehicles. Yes, and another great point made in the questions box, with the tax incentives available, the RAV4 Prime can be purchased at a really similar cost to the traditional gas-powered car. So again, if you take all of those, maintenance savings, repair savings, and fuel savings all together, on top of the federal incentives and the state incentives, it really makes a lot of economic sense. And so it's worth doing the math to see if that makes sense for you. Obviously, you can only take advantage of those things if the upfront cost isn't a barrier for you, and you are looking towards, more lifetime savings. But yes, for lots of people, transitioning to an electric car is already affordable, and in fact, a smart thing to do. Yes, and there has been one question about whether some Teslas are all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, and they are. So I believe you can buy the Model X, which is their luxury SUV, and that comes with all-wheel drive, and the Model Y, which you can pre-order, and it's supposed to be their more affordable SUV, also has all-wheel drive. Those cars tend to be on the more pricey side. So if you're buying pre-owned or thinking about buying pre-owned, it can be a little tricky. And Teslas also hold onto their value really well. They are not depreciating quickly at all, in part because of that large battery size. And so you're not going to see very much battery performance loss at all. But those are available on the pre-owned market as well. And I think you can buy them directly from Tesla. And before I get to some of the other questions that I see, I would love to just go through these shopping tips as someone who's been through this process. So the first thing I would say is to take a long test drive. Taking a test drive is important if you're buying any vehicle pre-owned or new for that matter, because you need to enjoy the feel of it. You need to, check out the features and make sure that the climate control works and all that stuff. But it's especially important for a used electric car. So what you want to do is drive the vehicle on the highway and at slow speeds, and compare how far you're driving to the range estimator on the dashboard. And that should give you a pretty good estimation of what condition the vehicle is in and whether it's a good value for the money that it's being offered. If you're driving in the cold weather, or if you're driving really fast, that might influence it as well. But it's worth just kind of seeing what the baseline is for 100% charge, and that might help you make the right decision, especially if you're comparing a couple of vehicles. That's less important if you're driving a plug-in hybrid. Those just don't really lose very much range at all in the long term, but you still want to take a long test drive to make sure that the car is operating well, and that you enjoy the feel of it. Again, a second tip is inspect everything as you would for any other pre-owned vehicle. So check the heating and the cooling, and all of those other mechanical bits. If you have the opportunity to plug in and test the charging cable that comes with the vehicle, that's a good thing to do as well, just to make sure that the cable is still in good order. And then finally, the last tip is, so many salesmen, particularly pre-owned vehicle salesmen, don't know very much about electric vehicles. So if you try and ask them overly complicated questions, or it can be hard for them to give them give you a credible answer. So I would recommend doing your homework as much as possible about electric vehicles before you get to the dealership, and ask the salesman questions that you maybe already know the answer to, just to get a sense of how knowledgeable and reputable they are specifically about electric vehicles. With the car that I bought, I happen to know much more about the vehicle than the man who was selling it to me. But it was still important to be able to talk to him and kind of figure out, what information he could provide to me. And for what it's worth, the vehicle had just appeared on the lot and he didn't even know how to adjust the seats because I had come in so quickly. So no fault to him there, but it is a testament to how in demand these vehicles are and what kind of low supply there is. So they fly off the lot really quickly, or they can fly off the lot quickly, especially in areas where there's lots of charging. And so it's worth kind of doing your homework before you get in, so that you feel confident and prepared and not at the whim of the salesman who is selling the vehicle to you. And that is it for my presentation. I will be sharing the slides and the recording of this for you to review on your own time. But I also encourage you to use the Drive Green with National Grid website in order to do some of that homework if you are seriously considering an electric vehicle. the more people learn about electric cars, the more interested and the more they want one. So it's definitely worth kind of checking it out and seeing if it's a good option for you. And if you have specific questions or would like to reach out to me after the webinar is over, you can reach me at that email, drivegreenuny@greenenergyconsumers.org. And so again, that's it for my presentation, but I do see one question here, which is, speaking of tax incentives, do any of them apply to buying pre-owned vehicles, or is it only new? So currently, all of the available federal incentives are eligible for new vehicles only. The purpose of those incentives is to really try and propel the market forward as quickly as possible. And so that means getting as many new vehicles on the road as they can. So both the federal and state incentives only apply to new vehicles. That being said, there's a lot of advocacy being done at the state level to try and change that and make the benefits of electric vehicles more accessible to all different kinds of consumers. So there may be other incentives coming in the future, but there are none available right now. And that is a good point. So if you are interested in an electric vehicle and you typically buy pre-owned cars, the incentives that are available for them can make it much more affordable on an upfront basis than you might think. So you can use the Drive Green with National Grid website to check out what new models are available and what the final prices would be, considering the federal incentive, the state incentive, and any additional regional discounts that would be applied to you. And we do have some recommendations of dealerships that have trustworthy and knowledgeable salespeople about electric cars, so that you can go in and get good answers to any questions that you might have as you're shopping. I know that NYSERDA has a Drive Clean list as well with dealerships that sell electric cars, and so that would be a good resource to utilize if you are comparing new and pre-owned vehicles. I don't see any other questions. So I think we can call it an afternoon. Thank you again for joining me at this afternoon webinar. I had a really good time talking about it. And again, all of these resources will be sent out to you promptly. So please utilize the information that we have. And I wish you the best and most stress-free car shopping process you can have. Thanks so much and have a good rest of your day.